So I was just sitting in front of the computer, foolishly not rolling the camera, and I said a whole thing that would make a great video, like a great like 1 minute video. And I'm really sad and angry that I wasn't rolling the camera. Uh, well, angry is not the right word. Disappointed, frustrated, chagrined, right? Um, I would be breaking my like no scripts, no rehearsal rule if uh, I don't know, turned on the camera and tried to perform exactly the same thing. So I guess I'm gonna wrap it up in meta and just go for it. Um, I was saying a lot of things. I did a joke lead in where I was gonna call you like my brothers, but that's gendered, and um, I'm on kind of a personal mission to like be an absolute tyrant and abolish gender forever. Because it's a social caste system. Like physical sex is real. That's a fact. You can just like look at the world and see it. I am male, right? Um, but that doesn't have to dictate like how I talk and smell and dress and think and who are my friends and how I am. And I'm not allowed to interact with people and like what jobs I do and all of this other stuff. Like that's fake. That's constructed. That's social convention, and that's exactly what a social caste system is. It's when you take people and like look at some birth trait, like oh, you were born to a poor family or whatever, and then you like sort them into buckets and tell them all these strict rules about how to like live and behave, and when they break those rules, you shun them and consider them like low status, unacceptable people. Like if you kind of look around with a critical view, like that's exactly what we do with this concept called gender. And I would like it not to be so. Like, I want to be an absolute bastard and just call everyone they them because I think words like she and he just bring harm. Like they are these pre-installed nasty little stink bombs of bias that we just put on people, each other, and ourselves, and like they so get in the way of perceiving uh, the real qualities that other people have. Like um, people are tag clouds. They have traits that they have, and then they lack traits that they lack. And a lot of those traits will correlate to something like birth sex, um, and, and other stuff too. That's also physical facts in the world, like sexual orientation. Like I think it seems empirically true that like for example, a lot of gay men tend more toward kind of sensitive emotional awareness than their heterosexual counterparts. And like I don't know what's up with that. Maybe it's culture, maybe it's biology, maybe it's a combination of the two. But like it is something we see, and we can even like make that observation and not automatically be creating a social caste system. Although it gets risky because it sort of tempts people toward this like reductive thinking where they kind of match everything to patterns and archetypes. Um, because like that's what we do. Like unconscious bias and pattern matching and learning are just three different words for the same thing. Like our brains are association machines. We compress, we crunch, we reduce the data that we see that comes into our senses into like a few easily memorized ideas. So like this, you don't have to see this with a child's eyes. You just think blanket. And that's a very easy thought to think. And you kind of think you know what's up with blankets. And that can actually prevent you from appreciating the unique qualities of this blanket or recognizing that it actually is not one. I don't know, it's a stupid example. So I envision a future where we look at people as tag clouds and we kind of meet each individual with like curiosity to learn about what qualities they have and what qualities they don't have. Like, yeah, I'm male and I'm like cis. I'm not a trans person, but maybe I like am a really empathetic person and like good communicator. And those are not qualities that we actually tend to assume that male coded people do not have. Um, hashtag men's issues, right? Uh, so this is kind of my personal thesis on all of that. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Actually, I've been thinking that I should just disable comments on all my videos. That might be how I do it, because like sometimes good discourse happens, but I think in the future, like, so in the present, we look back at the Middle Ages and we see that people would like dump their poop in a river and then go downstream and swim and fish and eat and play and drink and wash their clothes if they washed their clothes. And we look at that and we're like, oh my God, how do you not realize this is a terrible idea? Well, people didn't have germ theory. They just might have thought that like Mother Earth would wash things clean with the intrinsic properties of water, and that, you know, it didn't matter anymore once it got diluted. Anyway, so they get terribly sick and die of diseases that we now know are like preventable. And they'd say that, oh no, you know, your soul has been tainted, that your disease is God's will. No, you just drank shit, right? Anyway, so we have like revulsion and horror at the lack of basic sanitation and lack of knowledge about basic sanitation. I think in the not so distant future, we're going to look back in unmoderated comment sections the same way. Like, oh my God, how did people not realize this is a terrible idea and is horrible for everyone's health, right? Because the incentive structure to like care about other people and be civil is completely missing. People are very, very willing to like share with the in-group and also to rob the out-group. Like, there is kind of no limit on the impulse toward aggression against people we see as other, who like don't belong and aren't part of the tribe that we're part of. And we've really kind of shrunk to tribes of one, especially when we're in a space that has very low shared experience and a lot of disposability. People just vanish. There's no skin in the game. I use that phrase a lot. I like to read Nassim Nicholas Taleb. Taleb? I don't know how his name is pronounced. I like his books. He's cantankerous. He's a deeply original thinker. And I am changed by reading him. I don't agree with everything he says. I think a lot of people would find some of his stuff offensive. And maybe that's a good thing. Like, we need to be a little bit offended sometimes because new ideas can kind of like shock us out of our frame of awareness. The changes we need the most are often some of the most uncomfortable. And I think if we're only doing things that feel safe, we're actually living in an unhealthy way. Like, when you do a workout, you've got to feel the burn, or else you're not tearing up your muscles enough to have them grow back beefier, right? I think there's definitely moderation on this. Like, people shouldn't be cruel. People shouldn't expose themselves to cruelty. But I think confronting ideas that threaten our kind of sacred totems is not cruelty, it's courage. I think we should like have a shared social understanding that new ideas are probably a safe, acceptable thing. But that has its limits too. Because people can abuse that, you know? They can say, oh, I'm just proposing ideas, when they're maybe like fomenting mob sentiment of otherness against like some group of people they don't like. So I guess we also need a shared ethic that like otherness is a big problem and is terribly unhygienic and like not acceptable, right? Except it's also supernatural. So how do you deal with that? Like, when someone, I don't know, cuts me off on the freeway, I have a feeling of otherness against them. That's a stupid example. I don't mind being cut off. I mind when people aggressively pass me on residential streets or anywhere because I'm driving only slightly above the speed limit. Was I saying? Otherness, Taleb, comments. Okay. Well, by the time you're watching this video, you will know whether I have decided to enable comments. I guess maybe while I'm small, we'll see how it goes, because, you know, engagement's a great thing, but it doesn't scale well. Maybe I'll turn them off when I get bigger. Maybe I'll have a special channel where people who actually care can go through a little bit of extra friction to write me, and there's no guarantee that they will ever receive any attention or visibility at all, but I might actually read their comment on the channel. I think that's maybe a better social engineering solution. Like, social engineering is the answer. Back to the thing about hygiene and sanitation. People still, like, defecate. Wow, I'm getting texts. Stop making noise. Good. People still defecate in modern times, but, like, we put it in a different place. We put it into a sewer system, and we have like a well understood process of sanitation, personal cleansing, and hand washing, right? Which is taught to all children from a very young age, and like we could not really even conceive of life without it. When we go to maybe other countries where like the toilets are just constructed differently, like they have toilets where you squat over them in China, I think, instead of like sitting on them like a chair. Like it's the same basic concept, but then we're like, oh my god, this is, how do people live like this, right? That's like how deeply ingrained this knowledge is in our. By the way, I suck at YouTube for doing a whole video about disgusting things. Yeah, I should probably be less about that. But that's the whole point of sucking, is I don't have to identify as someone who makes successful resonant videos. Look, I've been talking for 10 minutes 40 seconds, and I think that is against guidelines. So I will wrap it up. But like, we're gonna the present, the status quo is not the future. Like the present is not the future. The way that things are done, like on the digital platforms where we spend a lot of our time and emotional energy and attention and headspace and so on, that's going to look really different starting within our lifetimes for sure. Maybe even sooner if we can like get better as a society at changing quickly. I don't know how feasible that is. Maybe a technology will like empower us, maybe not. Maybe the rate of change itself is training the modern generations to be ready for change faster. I know I definitely feel impatient when, like, say the for a while there was just .com, .net, .gov, .org, a small set of domain suffixes for like the internet. And more recently, like they came out with a giant list of like 200 that now are real. I don't know if the number's 200, but it's like order of 200. And there's a million of them. Like, I was looking at a site about venture capital, Hustle Fund, because I was watching a webinar where Eric Bahn, I think was his name, one of the general partners, did a presentation. He was just talking about Hustle Fund and doing Q&A, and it was really, really nice. It was a fireside chat. I like kind of fell in love with the fund and this person's ethos, and like really wanted to look them up and like approach them next time I have a startup that I'm doing. So I tried to find their site, and like hustlefund.com or something, or hustle.com, I was like taken by this totally different person who was like using it to build their personal brand. The actual domain was hustle.vc, I think, or hustlefund.vc. I just remember the suffix was VC, and I'm like, oh, this is so cool. This was like totally made for that use case. And like, it's so great that there's now a million of these. Like, I got so excited about like, yeah, we can like go out and make websites with all these clever creative names. And the internet is just going to seem so much more elegant and like well aligned with the consumer intention. Like the medium matches the mental UX, right? But that's people keep saying like, yeah, outside of Silicon Valley, no one knows about this stuff. Like adoption is and awareness are very, very low. You have to get a .com if you want to launch to the broader world, and that's just so disappointing. Like, come on, why? I get really frustrated. Here's otherness again, right? I get these feelings like I can't see what kind of experience other people are having when they don't get it. It just seems like this stupid arbitrary law, like, God is screwing me by making it true that people will just for no reason not understand things, and that will have to be true for a really long time, even though I consider it like offensive and invalid to not understand this, because it's so it's so manifest in my world, right? My frame of information. I'm hopeful. Well, but again, like, people of lots of ages are scattered across lots of places. Like, I just noticed I was doing an unconscious mapping of like middle America and slow adoption to older generations, and like, parents who, well, I guess nowadays parents are people who get it, but like my parents' generation, I'm 26 right now, in current year 2020. Like, well, I guess even they're coming around, but it took a while. when I was like younger, it was just this kind of hackneyed truth that like whatever it is, like printing a PDF or saving a document with a new file extension, like that is just several dimensional leaps beyond the level of, say, my mother's cognition for this stuff. I mean, she's a person of high general intelligence, but she just never had the. I don't know what it was. Like, just never adjusted to technology. Never made the personal commitment to adjust. But again, now she's got an iPad. Hey, speaking of making things small, like, okay, the friction was a lot lower. Like, the iPad is a deliberately consumer-friendly device with, like, very approachable, intuitive usage paradigms. And, like, there's lots of leaky abstraction. It's not actually that simple, but it gives you the illusion that you can just pick it up and do stuff. And that's cool because it gets people started. Like, kind of like how when you... I was saying in the other video, you're a little kid and you suck at making things, but you think you're really great, and that keeps you motivated. And by the time you realize how much you sucked, you actually don't suck, and you still feel pretty good, right? Because now you think you're actually good. It's kind of like that with making things easy for people to approach, making people feel super safe approaching something. They don't learn to be afraid until they're already a skilled enough user to manage the fear. I think we're going to end there. I was saying something about, like URL suffixes. So maybe modern times are going to whip us into shape and we're just going to get better at adjusting to change faster. But we're like definitely going to have to develop some acquired cultural immunity to like the shitty intuitive response. Like, COVID-19 is going on right now. And I was just hearing about someone at my company was talking about how lots of people are getting bullied for being Chinese because like there's this narrative that it's a Chinese virus. Like the first cases happened in some market in Wuhan. They transmitted from animals to people, and then people there got sick, and then it spreads like diseases do. But like, this is a force of nature, like a hurricane. Like hurricanes come out of, I don't know, a hurricane comes out of the Atlantic and hits Florida, and maybe it like started near Africa, but we don't call that an African hurricane and then bully African people. Like what the heck, right? People aren't seeing this virus as a force of nature. They're seeing it as like a weapon, maybe. I wonder why those things are perceived so differently. Maybe it's because the hurricane is something you can see on the outside, but the virus dwells in people and passes among people. So it kind of seems to be people, or be like a living thing that haunts people, right? Haven't I said I was going to end like 2 or 3 times? See, I suck at YouTube. Hurricane. Virus. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah. I have hope that things can change, that like the general pattern for society of adapting to change can improve. I think it's going to require like specifically all talking to each other about like this. It seems impossible until it's done. It seems like, oh man, people's animal nature is just insurmountable. I mean, back in the day of chamber pots, proposing like a public sanitation system, here I go again, right? With hand washing and sewage pipes might have seemed unattainable. It was just too much of a leap. It was a big change. It needed to be proposed as a series of smaller changes, or maybe one change that was so easy and so motivating to make that people would do it even though it's big, right? The 10x improvement. You can either have effortless small improvements or effortful huge improvements. People don't go for effortful small improvements so often. There's just too much motivation riding against it. So let's make the small improvements effortless. I guess that's the answer. You want to change the world. You want to control the future and people's fates and destinies. Control what is easy, obvious, fun, and convenient. That's the key. I mean, what has happened in the world? Like, look at recent changes in the last decade or two. Like patterns in social media. Look at even before that, like all economic evolution. What is easy, fun, obvious, and convenient? That's what takes over the world. So gamification is the answer. That's the moral of the story. Goodbye, my beloved chump noobs.